Hey everyone, Sky here to discuss The Favorite, starring Olivia Colman, Emma Stone, Rachel Weisz, and Nicholas Hoult, and directed by Yorgos Lanthimos. Forgive me if I said the name wrong, pal. Now, welcome to this year's Oscar countdown, and I already watched Black Panther, and I've already reviewed it last year. There's no reason for me to review it again. So, I'm going to start off with this movie, The Favorite, which is still in theaters. So, what did I think of it all the times I saw it? I only saw this twice, must keep in mind. Let's get into this. Queen Anne, played by Olivia Colman, deserves the Oscar more than the other actresses nominated for their parts. Sorry to disappoint Emma and Rachel. And this character that Olivia Colman plays is Queen Anne. And Lady Sarah, played by Rachel Weisz, who always comments rudely and negatively on how Anne is dressed, or does, or wants to do it. And it is a great performance by Olivia Colman, and I've seen her in other movies, for example. And she offers Lady Sarah a castle of her own in early 18th century England. As for Lady Sarah, I usually like Rachel Weisz, but here, it's not a bad performance. It's just that she's a very unlikable character who wants the war to continue and sends her husband off to war. And there's a scene later in the movie where she and the Queen make out as lesbians. And I'm like, what the fuck? I mean, it's fine that she wants to be a lesbian. I'll give her that. But seriously, showing that in this movie? Really? There's a lot of scenes I felt like that throughout the movie, the what the fuck moments. But that was a total what the fuck moment in this entire movie, and the only person who sees it is her cousin. Let's get to this cousin, shall we? The cousin's name is Abigail, played by Emma Stone, who I usually like because she's adorable, but here, her character is suspicious. Like, she's up to something for this entire movie, and she bugs me here too, particularly since we're introduced to her while someone is masturbating right in front of her and grabs her ass off the carriage. I thought, how fucking disturbing. Harley, played by Nicholas Hoult, who I've seen and liked him in other movies, and here he calls Lady Sarah the C word. Please don't make me say it. I'm not a fan of that word, and that's what's going to be going on with when I get to Black Klansman. And I'm not a fan of that word in his wig. I don't like Nicholas Holt's wig on his head. Looks absolutely silly. But I do like the costume designing. Maybe it'll get the Oscar for that. But his wig, I'm afraid it looks a little silly. I find this movie's score to be distracting for all the wrong reasons. Like, if we're supposed to have a quiet moment, this obnoxious score has to go. Because it's very distracting while we hear the actors talking and acting for the scene. Abigail goes to the woods to get a potion for the Queen. Right after her experience with the potion, after she burns her hand in the very hot oiled water by a colleague. I felt like she did that on purpose, and wants the Queen to feel better from her pain, and her cousin Lady Sarah almost gets her whipped, but stops it at the last second. And honestly, I don't quite understand how they're cousins, but they are is a bit of a strange choice in my opinion. But that's how Abigail is hired by the Queen. By the Queen? Like, really? That makes no sense. Harley, while at a party, asks Abigail to betray the Queen's trust by telling him what the Queen's plans are, I should say. And that's when the movie becomes strange to me. Plus all this bizarre shit going on in this movie. And I get very disappointed. There were times of the funky fish-led shots, and I thought, for a movie set in the 1800s, there's something terribly off about this movie with the funky fish leg shots, and I can't put my finger on it quite honestly. Abigail falls in love with someone who thinks is either a lord or a prince. I couldn't really get his name, playing a chasing game in the woods, and she's biting his lips repeatedly. And I thought that's kind of a rough way for two people to be in love, playing around while she's biting someone's mouth off or lips. Like, that's as he scares the crap out of her. That scene was odd and weirdly shot, in my opinion. I don't think the cinematography should go for this. Abigail has a connection with the queen that Lady Sarah is getting jealous of her and fires Abigail from being the queen's servant, and Abigail hits herself with the book. And this is how the movie gets very disappointing. Abigail reluctantly agrees to spy for Harley to get Lady Sarah out of the queen's throne, or castle, I should say. That's the stupidest what the fuck moment ever. Abigail poisons Lady Sarah's tea, and she goes horseback riding and throws up and gets knocked out for, I think, a day. It felt like a day. And her horse drags her on the ground as the couple that finds her, the humping couple, I should say, that already sold her while they're outside. And that was a weird what the fuck moment, because couldn't they have done it inside? Honestly, this script is ridiculous. Lady Sarah wakes up in their house, and they tell her not to leave, but eventually will be found by her trusted friend, whom I never got his name either, and that felt problematic for me. Lady Sarah is back at the castle and confronts Abigail as Anne's maid, which was Lady Sarah's position first, and Abigail gets married to the prince that played with her in the woods earlier in the film. And Lady Sarah wants Abigail out of the castle, and who gets kicked out of the castle and returns her key? Lady Sarah. And that didn't feel satisfying. She and Anne talked door to door, and that scene was prolonged. Like, please let it end. Meanwhile, Sarah writes a letter to Anne, and Abigail throws it in the fire, and that's why Abigail felt suspicious this whole movie. And the fact she steps briefly on a rabbit, like I can't explain it, while it was squealing for its life, and has her face put on Anne's legs, and this overly long shot, by the way, of Abigail, Anne, and the rabbits as credits begin to roll. And I, as well as my mother, when I took her to see this the second time, said this: "That's it?" Like, that ending was not very satisfying. Now it's time for the rating. I'll give this movie a 4.5 out of 10. This was a very strange movie with a bunch of what the fuck moments. And there were times when the score was playing and it got very distracting after a while. And the fish lens sequences, I thought, what am I watching here? Will this be the Best Picture winner of the year? I would probably say no, I don't think so. There are two good things about this movie that I'll give it. Just two things. And that's why I'm giving it the rating that I am. I'll give it 1, the costume design, and 2, the performance by Olivia Colman. Those are the things I think they should get the trophy for. I think those two deserve the Oscar, but otherwise, not a great nor good film. So I will be back next week with either Vice or Black Klansman. Or I'll be back with both, but until next time, and the Oscar goes to...